Each year, the graduating class selects the baccalaureate speaker from among the faculty. This year's graduating class has selected Associate Professor of Mathematics, Dr. Daniel Showalter, as the baccalaureate speaker. Daniel's decision to pursue a career in teaching mathematics was born during a 5-year journey around the world that included cobras, the Russian underground, and several other narrow escapes. During a 6-month stay with a family in the mountains of East India, he was disturbed by how quantitatively illiterate groups were being taken advantage of by moneylenders. This inspired him to pursue his master's in mathematics and PhD in mathematics education from Ohio University with the goal of raising quantitative literacy. Aside from authoring a textbook on quantitative reasoning, his focus has been on rural education, where his statistical analyses have been used on Capitol Hill to help increase funding for high-poverty schools. Daniel was the recipient of the Mathematical Association of America's 2021 John M. Smith Award for Distinguished Teaching for the Virginia, Maryland, D.C. section. Please join me in welcoming Daniel as he speaks on the topic of Tell Me a Story, Your Story.
All right. How's the volume here? Can we hear back there okay? All right. Graduates, beloveds of the graduates. Tonight, I want to talk a little bit about sharing our stories. So this is my daughter Ellie, when she was 2 years old, just about ready to go on her very first bike ride ever. This was Athens, Ohio. I just checked the bike out of a public library. It was just the two of us. And we set off on this course near the river. Beautiful, beautiful day. Gorgeous sky. The canopy of trees was above us. The birds were singing. It was like out of the movies. And we didn't even have to talk. For the first 15 minutes, we just rode in silence, enjoying God's nature together. And after 15 minutes, I said, Ellie, isn't this just so beautiful? And from behind me, I hear this muffled voice, I don't know. And so, for the first time in 15 minutes, I look behind me, horrible parenting move here, and her oversized helmet had fallen over in front of her face, just completely blocking her vision, and apparently it had happened right after we left the library too, so. I've always kept this story in my heart to remind me that a single situation can be very different for two people experiencing it at the same time. And fast forward to a couple years ago when I was preparing to lead a trip to Thailand. I had the students start journaling about 8 months before the trip, and it was something that Lindsay White wrote in her journal as we were preparing to go for the trip that has haunted and inspired me ever since. So Lindsay said, "What is suffocating the person beside me that I'm oblivious to?" And I got Lindsay's permission to use this, by the way. In true Lindsay fashion, she had first talked a little bit about some things that people around her didn't quite understand that she was going through, and then took this further step. And when I read this quote, I knew it was important, but I had no idea how deeply it would burrow itself into my heart. It essentially became the mantra for my whole Thailand trip. Because during the day, I would hang out with the students, we'd have fun, we'd laugh together, explore. And then in the night, I would have those same students' journals, and I would be reading them, tales that were much darker, a lot of suffering, pain, sometimes from the trip itself, sometimes from long before that. And the quote continued to echo around in my mind as I returned here to EMU campus. I can remember the first stats class that I taught after that. It was January. 30 students in the class. I had logged into my EMU Gmail, the two-factor authentication, the Moodle, the Panopto, the PowerPoint, all the stuff. And then the scary moment when my eyes rose to scan the students in the classroom. But this time, I didn't have the benefit of reading their journals. And I was almost paralyzed, just wondering, who in this room is suffering right now? Who in this room isn't sure how they're going to pay for this semester yet? Who in this room is going through something, some kind of physical or mental health struggle, or a loved one of theirs is, and they're focused on that right now? And me, as a teacher, how can I even hope to teach statistics to this group when so much of their mental and emotional capacity is already being taken up by these other things? So I spent many late nights wondering about these issues, journaling, praying, meditating, and I eventually came up with an idea for God on how perhaps as humans we could better experience empathy and understand what's going on in each other's minds. So I call it the 19th year experience, and this is how it works. You live the first 18 years of your life exactly as you did now, and then the first morning of your 19th year, you wake up, not in your own body, but in the body of someone else. And for that day and that night, you experience life exactly as this person experiences it. Every sight, every smell, every sound, every sensation, even internally, every hope, every fear, every memory that they're thinking about, every anxiety, everything they go through, you take in as well. And the second day you wake up as someone else, somewhere else in the world. Same thing, you go through their life, experiencing life as they do. And the third day, the fourth day, every day is a different person. But the thing is, this experience takes so much of your mental energy that you don't have any room to judge it. You don't have any room to even evaluate it. All you can do is just sponge up life as these people are experiencing it. 365 of these, your entire 19th year. Then, on your 20th year, your first day, you wake up back in your own body. This is me as a 20-year-old, by the way. You wake up in your own body, and the thing is different. You have your family, your home, everything's the same, except now you have access to these 365 days worth of memory. Just think how you would walk the world differently. How would you view incarceration differently? How would you view race differently? Gender? How would you view religion differently? Poverty? Disability? Every day that burrowed into your heart would still come out in crazy ways. I remember when I went here to EMU, I went to Guatemala on cross-cultural, and even to this day, when I meet someone from Guatemala, I feel this instant bond. And it would be the same with this. Think about this. Almost anyone you would meet in your life, if you're drawing on those 365 days worth of experience, you'll feel some kind of connection with, right? So to be honest, I probably didn't originate this idea fully. I mean, the center of the Christian story is that 2,000 years ago, God decided to come to earth as a human, to experience life as a human with all its pain and suffering. And I think that was similar to the 19th year experience. So we can't have that. We can't have this 19th year experience, but I do think that we can have a shadow of this experience through sharing stories with each other. So I want to give you 3 examples of sharing stories. This is Dave Arnold. Dave was crazy. As Philip and Micah talked about, Dave was on my hall. He lived next door to me in Elmwood. And within an hour of moving in, he had already managed to break the ceiling lights in our hallway. And we were bowling. I can't even remember how it happened, but this was typical Dave. Everywhere he went, he brought adventure, excitement, laughter. And for my first semester at college, my relationship with Dave was pretty much this dancing Kermit the Frog type of friendship. Lots of laughter, and it was wonderful, but not much more than that. And then everything changed one winter night. Dave and I were sitting around talking, and we were talking about how if people really knew us, if they knew the real us, that they would probably reject us in a heartbeat. And I looked at Dave and I said, Dave, there's nothing you could say to me that would lower my respect or my love for you. Dave got really quiet. Then he looked at me in the eye and he said, prove it. So we sat there and came up with a plan where we would tell each other our entire life story, starting at the earliest memories of childhood all the way through to the present. Everything we could remember, not just what we had done, but what we had thought and felt during those times. Think about that, what that involves, and the humiliation, the embarrassment there. And so we did. It took a long time, months. Dave went first. It was months and months of late night walks, often 4 or 5 hour long walks of him just pouring out story after story. But with every story, especially the ones that were most vulnerable, that Dave was most hesitant to share, those were the times when my respect and my love for Dave skyrocketed upwards. And the same happened when I shared my stories with him later on. So in the year or two after all this took place, I went through some pretty tough depression and lost most of my friendships. But my friendship with Dave was never in question. And I'm sure it was because of the vulnerability we shared and the stories that we shared with each other on those walks. Graduates, vulnerability is a precious gift. But it's a strange gift because you can't just cash it in anywhere you want. Think about it. If I would take a megaphone, go out to the EMU campus green, and just start revealing all my darkest secrets, I don't think that would end very well. Or if Susan tries to cash this check at Parkview, I don't think that would work well. Vulnerability is like this gift, this precious jewel, but you have to cash it in the right place for it to be worth something. And sharing stories with someone you trust, this is a place where you can convert that vulnerability into something, into bonds, into friendship, into respect, into love. Sharing stories rewards vulnerability. Second story, Thailand. So the first 6 weeks of our cross-cultural went fairly well, especially for being in COVID, some ups and downs. But then all of a sudden, it crashed hard. I won't go into the details, but we ended up in this Zoom room with all of us isolated, most of us isolated in separate rooms. And I came to the meeting feeling scared, confused, a bit betrayed by what had happened. And I got through the logistical part of the meeting okay. And then I got to the substance of the meeting. And I lost it. I broke down more than I ever have before or since in front of a group. I was sobbing, and I choked my way through my story. I shared my side of the story, and tears all over the screen, and then it was quiet, and I hit the red button for leave meeting for everyone, and I collapsed on this cold steel desk in an abandoned classroom of the YMCA where we were staying. It was one of the loneliest moments of my life. And had the story ended there, our second half of the cross-cultural would have been very different, but it didn't. Within seconds, my cell phone started ringing with text messages from students who were asking to share their stories as well. And for the next week, you can see this route in red marked around the city of Chiang Mai, around the YMCA where we were staying. I must have traveled that route 50, 60 times, one at a time with the students who had wanted to share, over and over again through the evening, all through the night, as they shared their stories. And with every story, it wasn't even necessarily much about the particular events. It reached much deeper than that and much further into their childhood. With every story, hearts were healed, wounds were repaired, trust was regained and made stronger than ever. And that week taught me just how important it is to hold off on judgment until you've heard someone's story. We talk a lot about personal resilience, which is very important, the ability to bounce back when something happens to you. I think relational resilience is also incredibly important. Think how comforting that is to have relationships where even if something happens, even if you mess up, or if you say something wrong, or something gets misinterpreted, or have a conflict, or there's a rumor, our connection runs deep enough that it can survive. So it was the sharing of stories that week that converted trip-long relationships into lifelong relationships that can now stand the test of time, adversity, distance, whatever. Sharing stories builds relational resilience. This is my soulmate and beloved wife, Juyeon. To me, the most beautiful part of my marriage with Juyeon is the sharing of all parts of our stories. She's been in a master's degree, by the way, really busy, so she hasn't heard any of this. Parts of our stories, of Juyeon and I's story, are fun, frolicky, and heartwarming. In fact, one of her most recent adventures is to become a laughter counselor, which is awesome. Such a lucky husband. But other parts of our stories are anxiety-provoking, terrifying, and dark. And to be able to share those parts of your story with someone and have them still accept you is to feel truly loved. But this is what I want to focus on with this slide. Even after 15 years of our marriage together, when Gian and I get ready to take a walk or sit down for a cup of coffee, I feel an excitement in myself, similar to what I felt during my years of backpacking around the world, living in different countries. Just like I never knew where a particular adventure would take me, I'm always curious to see how this particular conversation with Gian will play out. What new perspectives will I see on life through her eyes? A few years ago, a friend of mine asked me if I ever regret giving up the traveling lifestyle for a more rooted, family-oriented lifestyle. And I had to say that I really didn't even feel the difference, and I mean that. The best part of traveling for me was always the people I would meet and the stories that we would share with each other. And what I'm realizing is that form of 19th year experience travel, you can have that anytime, anywhere, with any person by sharing your stories with them. So cashing in your precious vulnerability, building relational resilience, and having this sustainable form of travel, these are just few of the benefits of sharing stories. Now I want to try something with you all. If you could all close your eyes, graduates and graduate lovers, all of you, close your eyes. I want you to think back at your time here at EMU. And I want you to think of 3 people who you would have liked to get to know a little better in a platonic sense. Someone, a staff member, a peer, a teammate, classmate, professor, someone at your internship or practicum. 3 people that you would just be curious to get to know better. Keep your eyes closed, and I want you now to think of what were the barriers that kept you from getting closer to that person. You can open your eyes. So I've asked the same question of several of you graduates in recent weeks, and the most common answers that I got were, 1, what if you ask someone to talk and they turn you down? Or what if your story isn't good enough? Or maybe you're burdening them? Or what if they accept your invitation to take a walk or something, and then there's this awkward silence where you can't think of anything to say? And there were several other answers, but these were the main barriers I came across. Now, in my 47-minute version of this speech, I had answers. I'm serious. I had answers to each one of these and more barriers, but I had to cut those out. So if you really think that you have a barrier, that you came up with a barrier that is insurmountable, I want you to talk with me after the speech, and we'll talk through that. But I can assure you that whatever the barriers, whatever the risks that are involved, and there are some involved in sharing your stories, the potential benefits of these connections far outweigh these risks. So listen closely. This is my most actionable part of the talk. Most of the things that you crave in life are going to be really hard to get. I do believe that you can get them, but they'll take years of sustained effort, sacrifice, perseverance. But human connection, it's different. Not only is it one of the most precious gifts on earth, but it's often, to quote Rain Robinson, only 15 seconds of courage away. Rain said this in a conversation we had a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was so beautiful, this idea that between you and this connection with the person is just getting up a little courage to ask them to do something. And this applies to the people around you here in Lehman, the people you'll be with this summer, next year, 5 years from now, the rest of your life. My experience tells me that in most of these cases, especially when your interests are platonic, romantic, I think, has a whole set of different rules and expectation. But platonic, if your interests are there, probably that person will also enjoy a connection with you. So it's like you've got all this wood prepared, you've got everything ready, you've got a match in your hand, but you still have to light it. And when you light that match, when you light that match, magic happens. So here's my challenge to you, graduates. In the next week or two, I want you to invite at least one person in your life who you've never really talked to on a personal level into a conversation. It could be one of the three that you thought of from EMU. By the way, it's not too late. I know you're realizing you're dispersing around the globe here, but one of my greatest friendships at EMU came from someone I met the night before I left in a conversation. Connection is strong. Sharing stories is strong. So it could be one of those three. It could be someone at home. It could be someone you end up randomly next to on a park bench. But I want you to take one of those relationships to a level where you can share stories with each other. And I know this is asking a lot. So just like in my stats classes, when I give a difficult assignment, I always try to make sure that there's a pathway to success for every student. So I've prepared something for you graduates. If you are willing to share your stories, but you're worried that you'll get turned down or that it won't be good enough or you won't know what to say, I will give you a 100% guarantee that I will say yes. I will not turn you down. I absolutely will. And not only that, when I say yes, I'm going to look like this. I will be so excited to share stories with you. It will make me so happy. But that's not it, graduates. This is only the beginning. Over the past few weeks, I have assembled an entire team of yes people. These people, your peers, are eagerly excited to also share stories. They've already agreed that they will share stories with you. And don't worry about what you will say. I've already preloaded them with questions, so if it gets awkward, they have something to go from. Don't worry about geography. It might be in person. It might be on Zoom. They're all ready to go. All you need to do, you contact me, email me, whatever, and I will put you in touch with someone or people on the yes team if you'd prefer more than one at a time, if that's more comfortable. And that's not it. This is like one of those midnight infomercials that just keeps going and going. Something even better. This was actually Molly's idea. Molly said, well, what if they could suggest specific topics to talk about that maybe the yes team has struggled with? So this yes team right here, they look happy, smiling, and they do have a lot of happy laughter in them. But this yes team collectively has gone through a lot. And this is some of the things that they said they would be willing to talk with you about, some specific topics. And they also stressed repeatedly that they'd be willing to talk about anything beyond these as well. So you just contact me if you want, throw in some topics, and we'll take care of the rest. So this is the last slide. I want to thank the YES team and several other students here who have been willing to share their stories with me over the past couple months. I'm a different person now than I was 2 months ago, and I attribute that to you. Graduates, I'm not worried about you finding your place in this world. I know you'll be able to do it. I've had you in class. I have wonderful colleagues that have had you in class and walked beside you. You'll be fine. It might be immediately you find something. It might be a long, winding trail like it was for me, but you will be fine, and you'll find your place in this world. My hope for you is that wherever you end up, whatever you're doing, whoever you're with, you'll find ways to share your unique story, to be courageous enough to be vulnerable, and wise enough to sense when to do so, and that you'll go out of your way to be intentional about inviting those around you into sacred spaces where they can share their stories with you.